Alright, it helps me to begin this if I actually click on the start button and get this going. I had this sound set up for the last like 15 minutes playing. Yeah, exactly 13 minutes ago I put this message down to try and open this and had to take a break to fill up my water and get my notes together. Welcome to all my precious loved ones. We are here today. I got some relaxation planned here. Because I got nothing to do today. This is how I celebrate every day. As the hermit and monk that I am. But I wanted to put a couple narrations in just to open the show with this information. It starts with my gratitude for being here and how amazing it feels just to have the privilege to experience this creativity and play the game of somebody's art and share it with people. My harm reduction attitude or ideology, if you will, my way of living, the monk's creed. This begins with the premise of liberation. We oppose infringement for all humankind. We all arise mutually. We all come into being, necessarily involved with all of the rest of the organisms that come into being and the environment that constitutes our field of forces. We all arise mutually. Our intelligence is the synergy of all of our desires and curiosity. A social organism amplifies all individuals, allowing them to make their own decisions. That's essentially the word math with regard to intelligent prosperity. Alan Watts describes when he defines what is wealth. Intelligence is the last word he says in that particular sentence where he's telling you what wealth is, because it's not money. You have to go all the way down into what he says in those talks to see what it means to say that money's not wealth. Because wealth can only be that which really actually has a value. And what is value? It is a sensation. You can define value by just seeing the basic truth at the very floor of Zen, the essential secret that you encounter right away, which is the sensation of the human imagination, all the sensations that constitute the fulfillment of our desires, our nature, essentially, is health. It's a clarity, well-being, peace state. I call it creative peace. So value is the energy of that creative peace. It is what it is we are trying to get or find. And so I realized when I first began this project, that's you. What you're looking for is you. When you actualize your wellness, when you have the sensation of clarity, of complete peace, of being totally in touch, in contact with you, with oneself, to be here now, as Watts says, that's your well-being. That's the basic presence of human mind. The whole mood that human mind is and contains. That's your well-being, actually. That's the objective of education, your well-being. And so, that's why I say with harm reduction, we're refusing infringement upon that. We are rejecting bigotry and classism and the fucking attainment gimmicks, the hang-up on attainments. We reject that. Because what we're looking for is you. It's oneself. It's what you already have. Okay, now Now let me jump to yesterday's writing, which is a very short, just kind of a summary of where I sit at this moment now. I'm in a moment of incredible struggle and trial. As I said yesterday, I gradually realized that I'm literally in a risk story, an incredibly trying human situation that had revealed the absolute worst version of me as my sanity eroded. I became more and more unhinged. So yesterday I wrote this resonant recap of where I'm at with everything. Energy travels. Getting something vulturism perpetuates the illnesses of coercion and disconnect. Twitch has brought me to many excellent people practicing creative peace, the way of not getting something, but instead giving, to channel the energy of reality. There is only love. Alan Watts says this very nicely and clearly in a way that allowed me to title this whole insight. Existence is love. It's not ours to command. It's a power which flows, channeling our desires and our curiosity and our outgoing sharing, what we're exuding out into the world. Alan Watts says that loving people are apt to give things away, and they exude love. They are in every way like rivers. They stream. That's what he says in the talk given in the 60s. And so now we're here. We can literally stream our inmost joy and do so in such a way that is founded on the fair use, the Zen fair use. This is for education purposes. That means the purposes of your well-being to be found and to be seen. My sole interest is giving it away for free for the benefit of our social organism, for the goodness and well-being of the total, which means everybody must have it for it to exist. We don't really have well-being if there are those who it's being infringed. This mental health focus is at the center of all my content in the spirit of nature. Nature's mechanism is sharing. I was writing a message here to one of my friends here, Twitch people. I build this idea of educational sovereignty, of declaring complete refusal of infringement on our wellness and goodness. I build this idea by distributing it. It's a blueprint for sharing. So my stream takes place on this core premise of being the river containing this blueprint, and I stream out as such to make this information available to my social organism, to the whole community of selves that is oneself, the entire field of forces. So I started there with those ideas. Right there was the best words I had. I filled in some extra to my original statement that I have here on the screen. But a year later, after actually starting to make content, I have the full realization of 3 inseparable functions that I am describing with the Monk Education Adventure School idea. The first one's called the awareness toggle. You identify and bypass illusions and coercion so you can truly see you. Then you have creating your instructions. This is creative action to heal accumulated particles of trauma, things that are corroding and hiding you, part of that coercion and illusion. We do an action called creating your instructions so that those particles, those chains binding you down, can be cleaned up and cleared. It's like cleaning your house or organizing your inventory. And it enables you to do that awareness toggle in a way that flows, so that is vibrating, like the vibration of life. You rescue your inner child from harm chains. That is what I had to do to come here and get to my inmost creative peace. And then the third one is social peace waging. This is a guide to helping each other be excellent and make the amazing things of our inmost heart. When you've confronted your inmost joy and rescued the child selves buried under harm, you can then use that to lift others and see what they can make. I talked about this when I was beginning this current series or chapter in my project. I spoke about peace waging with the question, what are we waging? So seeing what we all can make is literally the act of innovation and of social organism intelligence. That's the third piece that my education blueprint contains, the necessity to do peace waging. So we may obtain peace wealth. Okay, I have to open Discord for one last chunk that goes after that before I read the narration that was written as the big sum up point of this chapter of what I am inventing and blueprinting now. In my Discord, I kind of keep a table of contents and just a path showing the arrival points and the curriculum as it gets built here. So that's what my Discord contains, it's just a reference. It's pretty easy to do this in Discord as opposed to any other blogging or posting system, even though I do writing on blog. It's just Discord is sensical because I have channels, and then I can just write the communication feed from me to me and whoever else is necessarily involved with the education startup action I'm trying to do here. Which I explained to my friend when I was messaging with him earlier. My big ultra mission, my big dream mission is to start up education places where everyone's invited and it's for inclusion and defeating infringement, safety from all infringement. This is the monastery, because the fundamental aspect of monk is refusing to get something, only to give. So I build it by distributing, by giving it. Okay, here we go. We've got the Adventure School. So I need to play a clip from my friend Spoopy Squad from D-Does Plays. I have that clip pulled up right here. I just need to drop it on the page that will output the audio. The other browser. Okay, got it. Let's pull that up. Let me verify the sound is playing using my stream audio checker. making sure this actually plays. No, not that. I guess I can go there. Okay. Okay, that's a little bit too loud background noise. I'm gonna go ahead and recreate this game too. I have to take Rave on and off the channel here. Won't show up.
There are people, for example, who can see the web as a trap and get stuck with that.
Okay, it's working.
There are people to whom existence is simply hateful. They see it as nothing but a ghastly mistake. The Lord really erred when he created this world, because he arranged it in such a way
So
that
overall
everything
level's
lives
very quiet.
by eating something else.
And
And there isn't really, what I'm doing is I'm describing a certain point of view. I'm not exactly philosophizing, I'm describing a point of view. You can look at life in such a way that the whole thing is this ghastly mistake. For example, there is no such thing as genuine kindness or love. Everybody is really pretending that they're loving other people in order to get some advantage from them. And indeed, there is a point of view which occurs in certain forms of paranoia, where people don't seem to be real. They are mechanisms. And you can think that out quite intensely with a good deal of intelligence. After all, if you start from a good old Darwinian or Freudian basis and see that man is a material machine and that the consciousness of man is simply a very, very involved and complicated form of chemistry, and that's what it is, you see. Well, then these awful mechanical things, these Frankenstein,
okay,
that everybody is, they come around
boost the
and
level
they say,
a little
well,
bit.
I'm alive. I'm a human
But,
being.
not
I
quite
love,
that
I
much.
hate, I have problems, I feel. And you feel like saying, come on, you're just a monster. And you put on the civilized act, because really you're just a set of teeth on the end of a tube. And you've got a ganglion behind those teeth, which you call your brain or your alleged mind. And this thing is really basically there for two purposes. One, to be cunning enough to get something to eat, put down the tube, and the other is, you know what, Mr. Freud's libido. And that's the other thing. And everything else, you see, can be construed as an elaborate, subtle way of pretending that that's not really what you want to do. But you do. But you put on a great show. Now, some people, according to this theory, according to this view, get mixed up. They so repress that what they really want to do is to eat and to screw, that they get involved in higher things that are the masks for these activities, and think that that's the real purpose of life. And then they become what's called neurotic. And so because they get involved in being pure camouflage. So that's what's called escaping from the facts, not looking at life, not looking at reality directly. Now, this is a very strange thing, you see, that it is partly true that the universe, so far as its biological aspect is concerned, is this weird system that lives by everybody eating everybody else. Only what we do to maintain what is called order and civilization is that various species make agreements, as it were, that they won't eat each other. They'll cooperate, and so be an enormous gang which can beat down the others. So the human being is the most successful so far of this gangster arrangement. We are the most predatory monsters on Earth, and we have cooperated to assault the fish and the vegetables and the chickens and the cows and everything, see? Only we do it by not letting our left hand know what our right hand do it. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, unless gentlemen happen to be prone to going hunting as a sport, they don't see their food killed. They don't see the slaughterhouse. And so it's all what you get in the butcher, in the market. A steak, you know, is a thing in its own right. It has nothing to do with a cow. A steak is the thing shaped thus and so, and it looks as if it might be like a banana or something like that, you know, and nobody worries. And when a fish is served up, it does indeed look like a fish, but it's not the squiggly, squirmy fish that comes out on the end of the fisherman's lines. You know, when you really fish, you realize that the fish doesn't like it very much. No. There is that absolutely extraordinary side of things that is really terrifying. And so, let me repeat the illustration I used of the cross in the net, where one side of it is scissors that cut and eat, teeth that chew and get this thing in, and the opening side of it is like James Joyce's in Ulysses, the girl who says yes, and I said yes, yes, yes. She wants to be absolutely ravaged by her man, you see. So it's open, open, open. But now comes if we take the dark view of things, the horrible view, excuse me if I go into some rather grisly details, but have you ever heard of a vagina dentata? That is the idea that in the sexual organ of the woman there are teeth. And a lot of men have this fantasy, and so are rendered impotent. They don't make love, because they feel that the price of this blessed experience, this creative experience, this loving experience, is you're going to get trapped. You're going to get emasculated. You're going to lose your precious member. And this is a very ancient fantasy. It appears throughout all known history. Because, you see, this is simply the woman's come on.
There's a slight tangent, but I'm leaving it in.
Really to get you. She is basically a spider mother, you see, who is selfish and doesn't really love you. Not really. It says she does. And, of course, there are, on the other side, all the tricks of the men. So, this is a view of the world as a system of mutual exploitation and of maximal selfishness.
That may be, but the abuse I have experienced is consistent with this description of somebody who says with words that they love or care about you, but their behavior is infringement and abuse. You have to be able to understand that, what the term double bind means. And in thinking about the creative piece that we're after? What does it mean if somebody is infringing on you but claiming to care about you? And how to deal with that?
Now, it's a very profitable view to explore. Everybody should do in their lifetime sometime two things. One is to consider death, to observe skulls and skeletons, and to wonder what it will be like to go to sleep and never wake up. Never. That is a very gloomy thing for contemplation, but it's like manure. Just as manure fertilizes the plants and so on, so the contemplation of death and the acceptance of death is very highly generative of creative life. You get wonderful things out of that. And the other thing to contemplate is to follow the possibility of being, of the idea that you are totally selfish. That you don't have a good thing to be said for you at all. You are a complete, utter rascal. Now, the Christians have avoided this, because although they say in their Episcopalian form of confession that we have erred and strayed from thy ways like lost sheep, and we have followed too much the devices and desires of our own hearts, too much. We have offended against thy holy laws. We have left undone those things which we ought to have done, and we have done those things which we ought not to have done, and there is no health in us. But it ought to be different. And we're going to do our best to amend with the help of God's grace. And that is a real con act. Because, we go into that. So you find in that sense of the word, if you equate health with genuine love and perfect unselfishness, then in that sense there is no health in us when we look at ourselves from this point of view. Now, when you go deeply into the nature of selfishness, what do you discover? You say, I love myself, I seek my own advantage. Now, what is the self that I love? What do I want? And that becomes an increasingly ever-deepening puzzle. Now, I've often referred to this when you say to somebody else, I love you. It's always rather disconcerting to the person to whom you say that. If you imply that you love them with a pure, disinterested, and holy love, they automatically suspect it as being a little bit phony. But if you say, I love you so much I could eat you, that's an expression, it's a way of saying to a person, you attract me so much that I can't help it. I'm absolutely bowled over by you. I'm gone. And people like that. Then they feel they're really being loved, and it's absolutely genuine.
This is the web of life.
But now,
Talk.
I love you so much I could eat you. Now what the devil do I want? I certainly don't want to eat the girl in the sense of literally devouring her.
Then she would disappear.
Then she'd disappear.
Can't have that.
But I love myself. And what is me? In what way do I know me? Well, it suddenly occurs to me that I know me only in terms of you. See, when I think of anything that I know and that I like, then it's always something that can be viewed as other than me. I can never get to look at me, real me. It's always behind. It's always hidden. And I really don't know it well enough to know whether I love it or not. Maybe I don't. Maybe it's an appalling mess. But certainly the things I do love and that I want from a selfish point of view, when I really think about them, they're all something else that's in a way outside me. Now, we saw yesterday, you see, that there is a reciprocity, a total mutual interdependence between what we call the self and what we call the other.
That's the warp and the woof. And so if you are perfectly honest about loving yourself, and you don't pull any punches, you don't pretend that you are anything other than exactly what you are,
You get rid of the
you
illusions.
suddenly come to discover that the self you love, if you really go into it, is the universe.
The whole field of forces that's here.
You don't like all of it. You're selective about it, as we saw in the beginning. Perception is selection. But on the whole, you love yourself in terms of what is other. Because it's only in terms of what is other that you have a self at all. So then, I feel that one of the very great things that C.G. Jung contributed to mankind's understanding was the concept of the shadow. That everybody has a shadow. And that the main task of the psychotherapist is to do what he called to integrate the evil. To, as it were, put the devil in us in its proper function. Because you see, it's always the devil.
How to outwit the devil is love the devil.
The scapegoat, the bastard, the bad guy, you see, the black sheep of the family. It's always from that point, which we could call the fly in the ointment, you see, or the speck in the egg, that generation comes. In other words, in the same way as in the drama, to have the play, it's necessary to introduce a villain. It's necessary to introduce a certain element of trouble. So, in the whole scheme of life, there has to be the shadow, because without the shadow, there can't be the substance. So this is why there is a very strange association between crime and all naughty things and holiness. Meaning, where we consider holiness, you see, holiness is way beyond being good. Good people aren't necessarily holy people. A holy person is one who is whole, who has, as it were, reconciled his opposites. And so there's always something slightly scary about holy people. And
this is what I was saying the other day.
People react to them in very strange ways.
I lost my train of thought.
Whether they're saints or devils.
You reach an ambiguity point,
So
and it
holy people
automatically
throughout
triggers and aggroes
always
bigots.
created a great deal of trouble.
They're
Along with
troublemakers.
their creative results. Take Jesus, for example. Trouble that Jesus created is absolutely incalculable. Think of the Crusades, the Inquisition, the heaven only knows what's gone on in the name of Jesus. Very remarkable. Freud's a big troublemaker, as well as a great healer, you see. It all goes together. So the holy person is scary, because he is like the earthquakes, or better still, he's like the ocean.
He's a warrior. He's the monk. He's the Joker.
Sunny day, you can say,
That is the tank.
Gorgeous. Go into it and relax and float around. But boy, when the storm comes, does that thing get mad. Terrifying. So there is in us the ocean, you see. And Jung felt that the whole point was to bring the two together, and by a kind of a fantastic honesty, to penetrate one's own motivations to the depths. But Jung had a tremendous humor, and he knew that nobody can be completely honest. That you will try and you'll have a great deal of success in exploring your motivations and your dark, unconscious depths. But there will be a certain point at which you will say, well, I've had enough of that. You know. And, do you see how, in a strange way, there's a certain sanity in that? When a person indulges in a certain kind of duplicity, of deception, there is something, you all laughed when I said that, there was something humorous about it. And this humor is a very funny thing. Basically, humor is an attitude of laughter about oneself. There is malicious humor, or which is laughing at other people, but real deep humor is laughter at oneself. Now, why fundamentally do you laugh about yourself? What makes you laugh about yourself? Isn't it because you know that there is a big difference between what goes on the outside and what goes on the inside? That if I hint, you see, that your inside is the opposite of your outside, it makes people laugh. If I don't do it unkindly. If I get up in the attitude of a preacher and say, you're a bunch of miserable sinners and you ought to be different, nobody laughs. But if I say, well, after all, boys will be boys and girls will be girls, and we all know, then people laugh. Now, you see, what's happening when we do that? Now, I passed you around a lot of embroidery to look at before we started. And I'm perfectly sure that you got the point, that there's a big difference between the front and the back. In some forms of embroidery, the back is very different from the front because people take shortcuts. In the front, everything is orderly, but you want to save that green thread, so you just take it straight across to the next leaf, which it doesn't do in nature, you see, but it does in embroidery. And it is supposed to be kind of messy on the backside. See, which side will you wear? You've got to be sure you get the front in front, have the back in the back. The back has all the little tricks in it, all the shortcuts, all the lowdown that people don't acknowledge, you see. And it's exactly the same with the way we live. You know, like sweeping the dust under the carpet in a hurry just before the guests come. I mean, we do ever so many things like that. And if you don't do it, if you don't think you do it, and you think, well, really, my embroidery is the same on both sides, see? Well, you're deceiving yourself. Because what you're doing is you're taking the shortcuts in another dimension, which you're keeping out of consciousness. Everybody takes the shortcuts. Everybody plays tricks. Everybody has in himself an element of duplicity, of deception. Because you see, from this point of view that I'm discussing, where the web is the trap, to be is to deceive.
It's much more important to record what happened.
Think of camouflage. The chameleon who changes its color. Think of the butterfly pretending it has eyes. Think of the flower saying to the bee, like my honey? Bee says, wow. But then that means that the bee has to be, and it has to go on living, and all the trouble it takes to go around collecting honey and raising other bees and organizing itself and doing that dance which tells the other bees where there's more honey. There's all that stuff to do. But the flower was deceptive. Now, in the same way, I've often said life is a drama, and a drama is a deception. It's a big act. And you know my metaphor, which came up very amusingly in San Jose, where I liken a human being to an onion. Because when you peel an onion and you don't really understand the nature of an onion,
you might look for the pit in the center, like any ordinary fruit has. But the onion doesn't have a center. It's all skins. So when you get right down, there's nothing but a bunch of skins. You say, well, that was kind of disappointing. But of course you have to understand that the skins were the part that you eat. Well, in rather the same way, you see, you find when you explore yourself and your motivations, and you go through and through and you try to find out that thing which is really genuine. That's why in Zen discipline, they give you koans which require a perfectly genuine act. An act of total and absolute sincerity. And people knock themselves out trying to do this thing, but they always know that the master's going to catch them. Because he reads their thought. You know that story of von Kleist about the man who had a fight with a bear? The bear could read his thoughts, so that the only way of hitting the bear was to do so not on purpose. Because the bear would know in advance. So it's the same in working with a Zen master. You have to do the genuine act, not on purpose. But since you're put in a situation where it's rather formal, and you're supposed to do it on purpose, you're stuck, you see. So you explore the onion, and you go in and in and in, and then you find, well, it's all a deception. Now then the question arises, who's deceiving who? Who's fooling who? I'm fooling me? What is fooling? Fooling is playing like you're there when you're not. You know, getting somebody else to answer your name in the roll call. So, we're all, you see, this is the metaphysical basis of it. This is what the Hindus mean by Maya, the world illusion. The world is playing it's there when it isn't. And it's a trap. And it sucks you in. And you can't get out of it. And it's a thorough big trap, too. But always, when you get an idea like this, or a feeling like this, follow it to its extreme. Don't back out from it. If you find you're selfish, go to the extreme of what selfishness means. Confusion largely results from not following feelings or ideas to their depth.
You gotta go all the way in
You know,
to actually
you
know,
want to be immortal.
to get the sensation of it.
Do you really want to do that? Think about it. Really go into it, what it would be like. People say they want this, that, and the other. They want this kind of car, they want this kind of dress, or so on, and this much money, and so on. It's always a good idea to think it right through. What it would involve, see, to be in that situation, to have those desires fulfilled. Also, when you form a relationship to another person, think it through too. You see? How inconvenient could they be? However attractive. And always in other words, turn the embroidery round and look at the underside, but don't get caught doing it. See, that's something one does on the side in secret, because otherwise you play the game that everything is as it's supposed to be on the front. But that makes you humorous, and that makes you human. Now, who has questions?
What is your question? I'm trying to pull up a interlude song right now. Goes with this part before I transition to the final couple things I have for this mini segment. I just have to find which one of these archive has the interlude I'm trying to play in the final version of this.
Stop thinking.
This is from the lecture on Zen. Zen Bones is the title of it in the works.
And the moment you stop thinking,
I mean,
and therefore
the content that came out of this streaming behavior, which actually I still haven't really finished. That's right now that I'm making it. I'm putting this into this little sequence right now. I can put it in to this segment right here that I'm talking to you now. This is where it goes. Jump scare Watts. Yes, there he is.
if you talk all the time, you'll never hear what anybody else has to say. And therefore all you'll have to talk about is your own conversation. The same is true for people who think all the time. That means, when I use the word think, talking to yourself, subvocal conversation, the constant chit-chat of symbols and images and talk and words inside your skull. Now, if you do that all the time, you'll find that you've nothing to think about except thinking. And just as you have to stop talking to hear what others have to say, you have to stop thinking to find out what life is about. And the moment you stop thinking, you become into immediate contact with what Korzybski called, so delightfully, the unspeakable world. The most ordinary sights and sounds and smells, the texture of shadows on the floor in front of you. All these things, without being named and saying, that's a shadow, that's red, that's brown, that's somebody's foot. When you don't name things any longer, you start seeing them. Because, say, when a person says, I see a leaf, immediately one thinks of a spearhead-shaped thing outlined in black and filled in with flat green. No leaf looks like that. No leaves are not green. That's why Lao Tzu said, the 5 colors make a man blind, the 5 tones make a man deaf. Because if you can only see 5 colors, you're blind. And if you can only hear 5 tones in music, you're deaf. You see, if you force sound into 5 tones, you force color into 5 colors, you're blind and deaf. The world of color is infinite, as is the world of sound. And it is only through stopping, fixing conceptions on the world of color and sound, that you really begin to hear it and see it. So,
What it is to really see.
let me say again, I'm not talking about the ordering of ordinary everyday life in a reasonable and
Don't be nice
methodical
people.
way as being school teacherish and saying, nice, if you were nice people, that's what you would do. For heaven's sake, don't be nice people. But the thing is that unless you do have that basic framework of a certain kind of order and a certain kind of discipline, the force of liberation will blow the world to pieces. It's too strong a current for the wire.
If you're too afraid to find out what your question is, nothing will ever get broken apart. Watts is saying we have to ask the questions that break everything apart sometimes, and see that the break apart can't be prevented. It always has to happen. That's a mechanism of life. It's the shadow that lets us see anything happening or existing whatsoever. The meaning of the fact that life is a vibration. It has to be a vibration to be anything at all. I'm gonna play like 20 seconds of this under the fair use. This is such a fucking perfect intro and instrumental overall for this song about this topic, about falling. Such a perfect instrumental. The hook opens up the rest of the feeling in that progression. The hook, while keeping that basic riff going, puts a floor and a space around it. It non-verbally conveys the shadow and the thing, the good joy that is. Next I have D, channel D Does Plays, resonating social organism intelligence.
Right. If energy stops at you, then energy stops at you. But if you allow yourself to become a conduit of that energy, then you charge yourself, you charge the people around you, and you can charge strangers, you can charge items, you can charge events, just by believing in it and not believing that it should serve you. That's at least kind of like, it's a silly, I don't want to call it silly. I know it kind of deems in, or kind of errs on the idea of spirituality with that, but like if you mean well and you want to mean well to other people, people can smell that, dude. People can feel that. Bro, just stream for yourself. Right, Legs? Or stream for me, baby. Hey, Frioles, how you doing, dude?
So you don't grow your craft grows you, your image of you. The image of reality is what grows if you do your craft. It's actualization of what there is in the core of your field of forces. It's already there. You're just going to look at it to find out what it is. That's what's in the treasure chest when you go all the way in and complete the gameplay that is in front of you to do this. Creativity is play. You have the awareness where you've actually seen you, so you know what you're going toward, what you're questing toward, what your question is. Then you have creative peace made of contemplation and celebration, the collaboration of any crafter with audience. And you can be your own audience. That's the collaboration piece. That's your creative piece. Then you have the crafting plus community is peaceful craft. That is specifically about what happens when you've seen and you've made visible what is you, what is already there, that others can see, and you can see others. You can show them how. So that we're all seeing what is the intelligence of our organism. That is wealth, to see that. To gain what there is, the resources, the goodness, of course, sustenance, the ability to have health, and to have no infringement, be opposing every infringement. So this is a community lifting each other up. The definition of group, which is the polarity opposite of a crowd that is only de-individualizing by doing bossing, infringement, and coercion, and superiority, racism, and bigotry to each other. That's erasing the individuality, which erases yourself. That's erasing yourself when you infringe someone else. You can't see you. If you want to delete the person who's got a different view than you instead of talking to them to see what that different view is, if you want to eliminate the opponent instead of have swordsmanship and play the game, if you want to grief and destroy what's been built instead of participate in the goodness of what the function is that thing was built for, the resource and the joy that it's bringing forth, you don't want to participate in that, you just want to take it apart, that's called griefing, that's called team killing. That's a crowd de-individualizing itself in each other, an organism in its own way, which by definition kills the organism. It kills what the organism is. It strangles it and it chokes it out, bleeds it out. It cancers itself to death by getting in its own way with bossing, watching, surveillance, policing, and not trusting. Gonna put one more interlude here from my clip because it's part of this post that I'm adding to the end of this little segment before I play the game today, which is my replacement for ceremonies in church which didn't make sense, which weren't being done for the celebration, for the love of feeling the joy and sharing the joy. Alan Watts criticizes religious institution for this reason, which means my activity of choice, showing the game I love, showing the things that give me joy, is the actualization of what's wrong in the religious institutional, which isn't performing celebration and creativity together. So my house of creativity, the monastery place that this is, it's what Alan Watts is saying church should have been or should try to be, which is why I always thought of attending live performances, concerts, was literally the act of worship where sitting in a church, singing a religious nursery rhyme could still be it. You could still be celebrating that with your whole joy if that's making you that happy. Then yes. But if it's not, then you need to do something that is. And that's what is shown in the art where I combine video game feelings and playthrough and instructional experiences with this information, with this knowledge I'm trying to share.
For getting people to realize what it is to be here and now. And to see that this is what's important. Whenever you get into the meditative state, by whatever means, you suddenly understand that the whole point of life is what you're doing, where you are. And this results in a kind of untightening of all your muscles. And you suddenly see that it really is worth looking around. That the chips of wood on the log, funny markings on the concrete,
The expression, gesture, what it's all. For getting people to realize what it is to be here and now. And to see that this is what's important. Whenever you get into the meditative state, by whatever means you suddenly understand that the whole point of life is what you're doing, where you are. And this results in a kind of untightening of all your muscles. And you suddenly see that it really is worth looking around. That the chips of wood on the log, the funny markings on the concrete, the expression, gesture, what it's all.
I have been pondering how do we make crafts, which led straight to the question about questions. Instructions. This is the instructions it has become. The question was, how do you use free will / make any decision which manifests your voluntary energy? Watt says spontaneity. It cannot be bossed. So how do you use it? How do you hit the bear that predicts every motion? After unpacking the insight in this arrival point, it feels like this. Number one, there's an interaction that is necessary to creativity that happens across all of the mediums you might use to share it with audience. Self-collaboration. You are becoming closer and closer in touch with what it is that you can craft. You are the audience. You trying to see you, to contact yourself. You have platforms for your voice with the objective of bringing forth your joy. That's the reason to use a social media, to put what is important to you into the community, made up of you contacting yourself and anyone else who finds you because you have contacted yourself. Number two, asking the questions is questing. You are scaffolding along, configuring the particles in the field of forces. You are building each cube in front of you to ascend to a height, to the top edge of your Minecraft environment, and see the whole thing with the Zen paradox view. Following a sequence of instructions which implement questions effectively is the skill of asking. The skill we are building, as Alan Watts describes, the way to get pleasure, to have asking, to say, what's here, what can we find here, to quest for that treasure. That is something that's there. You just go pick it up. You just go open the treasure chest. It's right there already. You already are where it is. Number three, to resist infringement, abuse, you have faced your inmost passion, the joy inside, in order to let it be seen. To say to the person saying, don't look at it, don't see it, to say to that person, no, we will not. No, we will not be driven into unwellness by you. We will rise in well-being and in human contact because we are waging peace. We do so by teaching creative peace and practicing the peaceful craft. The boss who wants to say, you don't make your decision, I make your decision for you, is a polarity opposite of unintelligence for the intelligence of one who says, I'm just trying to see you, and I can't tell you what that is. You have to look at it and find it and show us what that means. That's the teacher who's educating, who's projecting a well-being light, and he's just trying to learn the student to reflect that curiosity to find out what that question is, to assist the student in asking, what is my question? What's your question? I want you to know what's your question. That's my battle shout, or education message, as it were. The full essence of human contact is a blinding warmth. It is heat whispering. To resist infringement, number 3. Refuse abuse. You have faced your inmost passion, the joy inside, in order to let it be seen. Let yourself see it, and let us see it. Let no one push you away hidden. Battle shout it. Bring forth what's within is the honest excellence of human mind that Zen is pointing directly to, and feeling stupid and weird and awkward that words don't really do the job. They just reference the sensations we contain. The sensations themselves are why we're making the noises pointing to it. How to craft your message. To me, that means create the words. So I say my creative arrival point is that I created my words. If you have an automatic word create talent of translating, as lots of people do who do quite well here on Twitch, sharing their excellence, there's some kind of a superpower channel that is your crafting, your action pattern, because literally it happens automatically in any activity you take on as your art. That's what you're showing if you do a stream. Is everything you're doing is crafting, it's instructing with your art. It's instructions. Your talent is the thing that will become seen of itself when you find your craft. What you do with crafting is that. It's crafting your voice into a thing that puts you in contact with you and the people who are like you, who are resonated by your message. That is the exact objective that gives you a noble aim that feels like the success in your epigenetics. Instructional content / artisan action. We are desperately trying to contact us. Okay, now that's it. Now we are gonna do this Diablo relaxation meditation, and I will comment on it as commentary flows. I have to step away, gotta go pee, then we can do the game. Let me put on some music that I want to hear in this interlude at the end of that segment from my Peacecraft. Let's play this one.
Bye.